It's a lot of nonsense.
Idiots saying nonsense.
Enough of this nonsense. Nonsense! Nonsense!
Layers and layers of nonsense.
What is this nonsense?
Nonsense is everywhere, surrounding us like an invisible cloud.
Nonsense in a brand new light.
That is what is nonsense.
Every day they write articles on nonsense.
A little nonsense now, relished by the wisest.
Nonsense.
Hello and welcome to Nonsense, the podcast where no topic is off topic and we explore the depths of the nonsensical world in which we find ourselves living. Today I'm joined by Dylan Louis Munroe, aka the Mapmaker, aka Deep State Mapping Project. He's a brilliant researcher and designer who spends his days laying out overwhelming amounts of information in a concise and beautiful way. He spent many hundreds of hours on each map he's created and continues to explore a number of fascinating topics and ideas through his mapping masterpieces. He also hosts a great show called New Templars, which talks about a wide variety of the same topics that his maps cover. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dylan.
Yeah.
Dylans of the world unite on a common mission.
For sure.
From different perspectives, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's all about achieving that shared perspective through this mapping of as close as we can get to truth.
Yeah.
You can never fully get there, and we've come to understand even more recently, especially with this election, that facts maybe don't even really exist. And what Deep Time always says is that facts don't matter, but it's what we strive for.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's start things off. If you don't mind, if you could give us a little brief intro into who you are and kind of what led you down this path of becoming a map maker, I guess.
Definitely. Well, born in New Orleans, high school in Cincinnati, college, Parsons in New York for fashion, worked in fashion design for 6 years. Really achieved my goals in that industry and wasn't really anything left for me to do there other than start my own business, which I'd always wanted to design t-shirts, but I was also always interested in fine art. So left fashion and started doing my own fine art thing. And when I moved out of New York back to Cincinnati, and I did one pretty major art project called Ghost, which had its own website and web store. It never really took off because I didn't really have the promotion tools I needed for it, and it was kind of a specific thing, and definitely didn't have any Fine Art World Gallery support. So after Ghost was sort of wrapping up, President Trump was elected president, and due to the fact that he had talked with Alex Jones on his campaign tour, I understood that he was more open to alternative thinking and what we call conspiracies, the derogatory term for it, and I felt that we were entering a period in this country that truth could be spoken more openly without being persecuted by the main persecutors of the past, which would have been the shadow government, the CIA. We've heard of so many conspiracy theorists from the 90s and the early 2000s that lost their lives for speaking the truth. And I really felt like with Trump as the president, that threat to our livelihoods for speaking the truth had been at least put on hold. And what we're finding now in the late period of his presidency is that it's really these tech monopolies that are just censoring the truth flat out, but at least we're still protected in terms of our health and livelihood and not having assassination squads come to our door for putting out the truth. So it's gone well during his presidency, and we're doing this interview at a very tumultuous time in the midst of the election. The election has always been one day in the past. I guess it was about 3 days in when George Bush was elected in 1999, was it, or 2000? And we're in this period when we're counting votes. Like every media outlet, every big tech is on Biden's side, and we're not sure who's going to win. And I really expected that. I didn't ever think that Deep State Mapping Project was only something that could exist during Trump's presidency. That was never I didn't even think that far in the future, to be honest. I thought that Trump really would drain the swamp and that we would enter a period where, we were permanently in this state of people awakening and truth being openly disseminated. And it seems like we're sort of regressing on that front and a lot of different fronts in society, that we're not really evolving as a species, but we may actually be devolving. And, there's certain people that are devolving and certain people that are fighting for us to evolve, but it's a very uncertain time. And so that's where we're at now with Deep State Mapping Project. I certainly hoped it could continue another at least 4 years for an 8-year Trump presidency, and that we would elect someone after that was on the same page of truth and justice and not the New World Order agenda, which, has been talked about for decades and decades, and still people are not seeing it. Even when it's right in their face, they still think that America is this democracy and example of freedom for the rest of the world, when really the world is all under one control system. And it is very clearly, especially since coronavirus, clearly controlled by this New World Order that is being centralized by the World Economic Forum and through policies set by these shadow organizations. My main map is the QWeb, which is the hidden history of humanity, and it's really a focus on CIA operations in the 20th century that have been sort of brushed under the rug of history, but have been declassified, are not conjecture, are not conspiracy theory. They're completely fact of what has occurred in this country and in the world in the late 20th century. And the three main things that I want people to take away from the QWeb are Bilderberg Group, Council on Foreign Relations, and Trilateral Commission. And, we've seen more recently the World Economic Forum really stepping up as what seems to be one of the major controlling bodies, but just to bang into people's heads that it is not the president you elect that is necessarily setting the policies. So that's where we're at, and we've done a lot since the QWeb. I think we're going to get into a lot of it in this interview.
Yeah, hopefully. Hope to cover a bit of it.
I got my whole folder out, so I can pull up whichever one we need to.
Nice.
I keep them all handy. I think we have them all here. There might be some missing, but... And, I have a few on the walls around me. I actually have the Healing Web here and the energy map over there. But I've sort of retired from the older ones. Like, I used to have the QWeb up, obviously, in my room. And, I've evolved past some of these. I definitely don't want to look at the Cult of Baal all day, even though that's one of my most popular posters I sell. I've actually never put that one up in my home because I feel like it's... I don't want to scare people from buying it because it's very important information, but it's definitely a darker energy. The Cult of Baal map, for your new listeners, is a breakdown of the early period of the QWeb, which the QWeb is a timeline of humanity's hidden history, and the Cult of Baal is showing how we got to this 20th century, how we got from ancient Egypt to the founding of the Federal Reserve, and how all the elite rulers of every society from ancient Egypt to Rome to America have been interconnected in very traceable ways through secret societies and certain events, and societies in one society that's modeled after a society in the previous society, and literally the same people, like the same lineage that has either traveled a country or traveled from one government to another, and they're all connected, and that's why we call it the Cult of Baal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's start off just by getting into, do you have a favorite map that you've made? Or not really? Are you kind of...
Well, I think it probably changes over time, but at this point, I would probably say my favorite one is the energy map.
Okay.
Because, the QWeb started as primarily focused on this sort of, I would say, predominantly dark timeline of, evil people trying to control the world through secret means. And then the Cult of Baal was even darker. Mm-hmm. And then the Healing Web was a little bit more balanced, since it was half big pharma, half holistic medicine. And so I did like the Healing Web a lot. I definitely feel the Healing Web has a lot of healing powers in it. I'll turn the camera here. That is the Healing Web on the wall, poster version. And but from there I went to the energy map, and the energy map was the first one that I would say wasn't really good or evil. It was just more like about natural law, and is actually more of from a universal perspective. It's not even from an earth-based perspective. So it's very galactic-y. And I'll hold that up so people can see what it looks like. I mean, the small version, you can barely read anything. This one's really meant to be humongous. It's meant to be printed at 60 inches. I'll turn the camera again to show you. This is actually the 40-inch one behind my headboard, which is meant to actually inspire energy inventions and dreams of energy contraptions, which is much the way that Nikola Tesla said that he was inspired to build his devices, that it wasn't through like heavy duty research and, going to 11 years of graduate school. He was getting downloads from what some people in certain books said were the Venusians, and that's what he said to them. And the Venusians are the Pleiadians. That's what led me to the Ashtar timeline. But I would say the energy map is my favorite just because it's sort of from this like neutral point of view. As an artist and as a designer, I was always really drawn to multicolor prints, not like a blue theme or a green theme, but I was always drawn to sort of like rainbow colored prints, not necessarily the rainbow of like the gay flag type rainbow, but just like massively multicolor, just like a whole smorgasbord of, it's like 5D, like opal-esque coloration. So that's why I really like the energy map. I mean, the QWeb's definitely multicolor as well. It's I think that's like 7 predominant colors, but the energy map is just, it's all over the board. Yeah. And the colors really came from a vision I had. Like I had done a really long in-depth interview, like this will probably be one night, and I went out, had a little smoky, and then came back, and I knew I was going to work on the energy map, but I didn't know what it looked like. And I came back after that interview and just glanced above my headboard, right where it actually is now. And there was nothing there at the time, or I think maybe it was a painting of something else, but I saw the energy map that night. I saw it completed. And so it was really easy for me to create it. I started by just blocking out the colors the way I saw them, and then I threw in the main keywords in the designated areas where I kind of just I was very guided on the energy map, and it was very easy to create as well. I was like barely even putting any effort into it. I was just like, and it was a download. For sure. And in a period of the year, actually just around this period right now, or maybe a little bit before this, like October last year, when the Pleiades is visible in the sky directly overhead in that period of the night. And I was definitely getting some downloads and assistance in creating the energy map. And it's been a little bit of a different process for every map. Some were more or less effort of my own behalf put into it. Like, for example, in creating the Ashtar timeline, which is all about the Pleiadians and extraterrestrials, Ashtar Command. You maybe would have thought that this would have been a download too, but I actually felt that I didn't receive hardly any assistance telepathically in creating this one. I guess they didn't want to toot their own horn, but it's all different. Every map sort of came about in a slightly different process, but there's definitely been some, I feel, telepathic assistance. So I like the energy map, and what the energy map is about, sometimes I get ahead of myself here and people are like, what the hell is he even talking about? The energy map is essentially a catalog of all different types of energy and energy technology spanning all of time from the dawn of the entire universe into the deep future, into extraterrestrial races, and it's non-Earth specific, like I said. It's from the perspective of any planetary system in any galaxy, and it takes into account technology resets, cataclysms, suppression of technology. And so it's very comprehensive. And I still have not done a full, I think to even explain the energy map would probably be a 5-hour video in itself. I did do a 45-minute speech on it at Conscious Life this year, and that really only scratched the surface. But it's all of these, each major map is really a behemoth, and eventually I will do a full breakdown of the energy map, but it's my favorite look-wise. And actually, I have it right here. I didn't want to do product plugs in this, but the newest version of the energy map is a tapestry that's 60 inches, so it's the biggest one we've produced yet.
Nice.
And I'm not even going to be able to hold it up because it's so big, but it's huge.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And so, yeah, I just love it. Like, I've always wanted to do big art, and without a big studio, it's hard to do those big paintings. Like whenever you go to the MoMA or the Guggenheim, you're always overwhelmed just by the size of the art. And so I was always wanting to do big art. And I think this tapestry, which I'm glad I found the company that made this, is my first sort of like step into actually getting to that scale that I've always wanted. And I think the next step will be doing some of these other artworks in larger tapestry format. But the energy map was the only one that was really meant to be that size. Okay. And it's almost illegible at smaller sizes. So energy map is currently my favorite. Always up for debate, though.
That being your favorite, could you touch on a few of your, I guess, the most interesting kind of things that came to you during the creation of that map? The most interesting technologies or the most interesting theories or things that you may have stumbled onto?
The main thing that I learned that was sort of new to me in the creation of that map was that the highest levels of government, international cooperation, and technology, we actually are building very advanced energy machines, which are tokamak reactors is what they're called. It's basically a fusion reactor. And, you know, these are international projects that they've received a little bit of press, but they're really not been pressed by the press and imposed into the minds of the general public that these are really viable options that are in the construction phase that will offer humanity pretty much endless energy. And I think really the only thing that's holding them back is the economic climate of having to rely on fossil fuels and the cabal, as we know it, having to have a limited supply of energy in order to have scarcity, in order to have control over the population. And the one I'm really referring to is called ITER, and it is in southern France. It's an international project with several, maybe almost like 20 or so countries involved in financing it. But there's also fusion reactors that have been built in China, Korea, at several different universities. I think ITER is probably the biggest one, but to really see that machine under construction, see how it's meant to work, and see all the research that's gone into previous versions of it, it's really clear that this is a viable option that is coming in the future, and that when it arrives, it will completely bring about a whole new economy and a whole new structure of society that is based on free energy instead of scarcity and control of resources. So that's what I'm really most excited for. I mean, we'll still be relying on the government to distribute this energy, and you know they might put a price tag on it, but just to see that these things are actually being built and that they are really almost near completion is very hopeful. And the other types of energy that I'm most interested in seeing developed and come to light in the public would be magnetic type engine technologies. So energy creation devices that rely on magnets to put out perpetual motion and thereby perpetual electricity. There's several examples of that too. There's certain designs that have been inspired by crop circles. Very interesting there. Oh God, this is why you need the big version of the energy map, because like when I try to read it here, it's like there's no way, Jose. But I've listed several here that were actually very viable options that were created, and then you know the inventors either have a mishap, they can't bring the invention to the commercial market, they're murdered. All different types of reasons why these magnetic engine developments do not ever make it to the mainstream public. But a few of them I'll mention: Howard Johnson motor, the Searle effect generator, AZPM thruster. There are several. Perendev, perpetual motion. You'll have to look at the energy map. Which actually right now there is no available download because my Patreon account was terminated 2 weeks ago. And I was using my Patreon to offer donors my more sort of advanced downloads. Certain maps I've created are still free downloads, which I feel are essential to perpetuate the Great Awakening. Those being the Q Web, the Healing Web, the COVID 5G map, ones that are pretty much essential for human health and survival. I continue to make those free, but my diagrams that I consider sort of like the more advanced tier, which are the energy map, the cult of Baal, those I did eventually have to put behind a paywall, which was my Patreon. And you got most of them for $1, and then you got some of the even more advanced ones for $5. So I'm looking to recreate that system somehow on my own website so that it can't be censored by any of these big tech monopolies. My own website is hosted by an independent hosting service, secret. I mean, you could probably look it up if you Google my domain, But it's an independent hosting service, and it's through open source software, WordPress and WooCommerce. And so I hope to really consolidate everything onto that platform so that it cannot be censored anymore. And also looking for a new video platform, because we haven't been terminated yet on YouTube. I'll mention I have the New Templars channel on YouTube, as well as a Deep State Mapping Project channel on YouTube. And the Deep State Mapping Project channel is really devoted to sharing my presentations from various expos. So that's not as much of like a regular posting channel. It's sort of more like a big post channel. But I have both those channels. They're both still active. Neither have been censored yet, thank goodness. But we're looking to find new platforms for everything from Instagram, Patreon, YouTube. And that's what I was meant to do this week, and I haven't made too much progress on it. But there's a lot of options out there. And actually, I was just speaking with a friend last night, and we have the idea for the next Deep State Mapping Project map to be a platform migration map. How does that sound?
Nice.
And I mean, it might sound pretty simple, but there's a lot of options out there. And so the platform migration map will hopefully show people all the options, show people, if I disappear, where they might find me. You can always check all of them. But I'm hoping with the platform migration map it was actually Vail Remove's idea last night to give each new platform a sort of like Yelp score to sort of guide people as to which of these new platforms might be the most successful.
For sure. Let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk a little, I believe you were taken off Instagram recently, right?
Yeah, so I had 3 accounts on Instagram. The main one was DSMP Official with 27,000 followers. That one was deleted. And at the same time that one was deleted, my smaller backup account, DSMP 2.0, was deleted. I think they just targeted DSMP possibly, and also my URL to my primary website, deepstatemappingproject.com, has been blocked from sharing in comments and in DMs on Facebook and Instagram. Wow. Which this is actually the only instance I've heard of a URL being blocked on those platforms. I'm sure there are others. Probably, I know InfoWars has had a lot of problems with their URL being blocked on Facebook and Twitter from even sharing it. But it's really an inconvenience. And so what I've had to do is use my secondary URL, which is actually my personal portfolio website, DylanLewisMunroe.com, and convert the homepage of that website into sort of almost like a little link tree for Deep State Mapping Project. So that's where we're at now. So we can still share a link to my homepage on the various platforms, but I can't share any links to direct products. And that's where the censorship is at on Instagram. And now, just to back up a few years, my first big censorship experience was my entire first DeepStateMappingProject.com website was terminated by Shopify. This was right after I had done an interview with Edge of Wonder, and my traffic increased exponentially overnight. I went from fairly low traffic to a lot of traffic. I mean, they had, I think, about 400,000 subscribers on their channel on YouTube, and that interview just caused my site to blow up. And after 2 weeks of really intense sales and blowing up intense traffic, the whole website was just terminated by Shopify with no real reason. They said, our terms of service, which that's always the excuse now, is terms of service. And so that was the first one to go. And then my next censorship experience was with MailChimp, which, if anyone knows, MailChimp is probably, I would say, the main newsletter platform that big corporations use, and also small corporations. I mean, everyone uses MailChimp. It's the #1 newsletter platform. And if anyone has never tried to do a newsletter before, you can't just put 10,000 people into your Gmail entry field and send it out. That just doesn't work. You have to do it through these platforms that, they've monopolized sending mass emails, which is fucked up in its own right. I'd be interested to know what you use for a newsletter, but there's a lot of different platforms out there. What are you able to divulge?
I haven't really sent out any newsletters as of recent.
Then you'll find out the pain. Because it's just okay, you have to pay some other company, $75 a month to send an email to the list that you put together, when, normally emails are free. So it's why do we have to pay? But, some of these platforms, they are nice that they add a drag and drop feature. But anyways, MailChimp was the second one to censor me. The good news was I was able to get my whole list back from them, and so I didn't lose any subscribers when they censored me. But it was a major inconvenience, and because I don't like setting those things up, it took several months to find a new one. And I was also looking for a new one, looking at everybody's terms of service, because they weren't specific in why I got censored from MailChimp, but this was around the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, and I had sent a newsletter just offering some basic advice on alternative cold and flu remedies, not making any claims that I had the cure to coronavirus, but just some basic stuff from the healing web. And when I reread their terms of service, that was the one thing I could see that I had violated. I mean, I guess any of my diagrams could be accused of violating a bullying policy, if I'm bullying the deep state. But they never say exactly why they're censoring you and taking away your free speech when you're only trying to help people and put out truthful, valid information. But I think that I got terminated on MailChimp because I was putting out a little bit of health advice. I'm not a doctor, but I have some common sense. So and then this really picked up in this election period in the past month or so, when first Facebook fell, then Instagram fell, and then Patreon fell. And so it's been rough. And I'm lucky that I survived the YouTube purge of October 15th, the epic YouTube purge that took out practically every QAnon channel on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so maybe we have a monopoly now. Actually, our live last night, which was our first live since the YouTube QAnon purge, we had our biggest live audience ever, which was only 60 viewers, but still. Our channel on YouTube is at 6,000 subscribers, and everyone always comments, why don't you guys have 100,000 subscribers? And I'm just like, because there is a certain little club of people and accounts that they're all connected, that they all do interviews with each other, and everybody thinks that all the different channels are independent. And I'm sorry to say, but even these QAnon ones, they're not all fully independent, and there's some kind of organizing force behind them. And I'm not just saying all of them, period, but a lot of the main ones, a lot of the ones that get above 300,000 subscribers, is they've had a gateway open for them. And that is what my Traders and Alliances map is primarily about. Let's see if I have it here. I'm not sure. There's a cult to Baal. But we have a whole video now on the Traders and Alliances map. It used to be Patreon only, but we now have it as a free video that everyone can watch a full explanation of it and see. Here's this one. We're not going to talk about this Great Awakening map. That's not my work. That's a counterfeit. I don't have the Traders and Alliances map right here, but the Traders and Alliances map that I created was pretty much showing who works for who in the truth and the UFO communities. And there are definitely hierarchical relationships. People have relationships with different media organizations, specifically the History Channel, owned by ultimately A&E, and then that owned by Disney and Hearst jointly. And then there's the whole spectrum of Gaia personalities.
Yeah.
Which, Gaia has its own, if you look into their origins, very, very corporate America origins of Gaia that do not really resonate with someone that's embodying like the 5D principles of love and light. And some other shadow figures as well. Every major truther, including Alex Jones and David Icke, there are questions to be asked, and very few of them could be considered truly independent. And there's questions about how these channels could have grown so big in a system that we know is so controlled and so censored, and how they have book deals, how they have books on Amazon. And to an extent, I know that InfoWars has had a lot of censorship. They've been removed from Facebook. They've definitely not had every door open for them. They've had payment gateways closed, which that's a very important one that I haven't experienced yet. When you start getting terminated by things like PayPal and Square, that can be a real setback for your business and a challenge to overcome. So I'm grateful that I haven't had the payment gateway door closed for me, but I'm not going to say I expect that, but I think the thing is once you start making more money, that's when the door closes for you,
Yeah.
Or the door opens for you. Like, how I got terminated on Shopify right when my business started booming. It's like they know who's poor and they know who has money, and they don't want people speaking the truth without any type of agreement or contract about boundaries, making too much money or becoming too powerful. And that's how the cabal works.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And we're slowly slipping further and further into that dystopian, censored world. Have you had any other kind of incidences beyond just digital censorship? Have you had any like gang stalking or any sort of real world experiences at all? Or
I have to say no, not really to that. And I think it's partially because Trump's been in office, and the CIA and these gang stalkers have been pretty much covering their own ass for the past 4 years, is what I feel about it.
Yeah.
But haven't had anything specifically like gang stalking or stalking. I was very nervous when I released The Healing Web the night I was publishing it. I was very nervous because I know Big Pharma was still even more active than some of these like intelligence agency gang stalkers. And the night I was releasing it, a cop car pulled up like in front of our house for a while, but then just sort of went away. It didn't end up being anything. And I've been nervous going to every convention, especially the ones in major downtown convention centers, which were the Alien Con conventions. I went to the primary convention center in downtown Baltimore and also in Dallas. And definitely got some cabal vibes. Actually, when we were at the convention center in Baltimore, there was a Shriners convention going on at the exact same time on a different floor of the convention center as Alien Con.
Oh, wow.
But no specific interference or interaction between those groups. And I'd say it's mainly this digital gang stalking, mainly just, I mean, not even really gang stalking, just, your platform gets shut down when you start having too much success, which I think that's effective enough for them. They don't need to they don't need to kill you. They can just like kill your finance or your digital operation, and that's pretty much enough for them to have their goals met. And if I think of anything else, I'll let you know. But I guess I would say there was some weirdness around the whole Trader's Map scenario. I was sort of, I guess you could say, like acquaintances with some of these groups, such as Edge of Wonder, Jordan Sather from Destroying the Illusion. I was having some invitations come into events, like Woke Psych in Phoenix, where I met them for the first time. That as soon as I turned on them, I didn't turn on them, but I started, looking into who they work for. And as soon as I did that, it wasn't any kind of gang stalking, but definitely all my interview invitations dried up very quickly. And so, it was interesting, like right before that event in Phoenix, it was called Woke Psych, and it was where I met Jordan and Edge of Wonder. I had just done interviews with Greg Carlwood on THC and Freeman Fly on the Freeman Fly Show, which I think those are two of the biggest conspiracy podcasts. I mean, those are right under like George Norrie, Coast to Coast, and like, I guess Joe Rogan is like the ultimate one, but that's not even really a conspiracy podcast. But it was interesting that Freeman and Greg Carlwood contacted me around the exact same time, which was late December 2018. And that, I did several interesting maps. Like Greg Carlwood did this entire whole section on alternative energy, but he never contacted me again to talk about the energy map. And so I do feel that there's some sort of like a conspiracy hierarchy that is connected to the cabal ultimately. If these podcasts are allowed to grow so large, that there's someone that's opening the door for them. And as much as it seems like their conversation is completely uncensored, I don't know exactly like how they got so big, or how their management team does their scheduling, or where the controlling the hidden hand actually goes in there and like pinches them. But there's something going on. And I think, it's great that a lot of people are starting new channels, and that information dissemination is becoming less centralized. And that's really what we need. I mean, the worst is just relying on mainstream news. And someone even mentioned to me recently that if you don't have cable TV, you don't even get Fox. So if all these elderly people in nursing homes trapped in their nursing homes, if they're not paying for cable TV, all they're getting is, I guess, like, what is it, ABC, maybe NBC, and like CBS.
Yeah,
I don't even know. Like, I don't watch TV, so I couldn't tell you. But it's like, to think that if you don't pay for cable, you're not even getting Fox. Like, that's like, think about how limited your perspective would be on the world. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you're not paying for cable, you're probably not looking at websites on the internet either. But, you know, I was just bragging in our video last night, like, when I'm looking at this election coverage, trying to figure out how many electoral votes there are and, you know, what people are saying across the world. Like, I'm looking at Russian news, I'm looking at CNN, Fox, InfoWars, Japanese news. I didn't actually look at Al Jazeera, but it would have been a good idea to. BBC, like, you need to look at every single news source you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Even the cuckoo ones that are doing like channel news from the Kremlin, news channel from secret Kremlin reports, which that would be whatdoesitmean.com. It's an interesting site to look at. Zero Hedge, globalresearch.ca. It's like, I try to get a perspective on everything, and I'm very much in the minority there, but I would encourage everyone to try to get a good perspective and to not become fans of any specific YouTube channel, especially one that has a big following, and not rely on any one source of information. Just, you know, try to collect everything and use your intuition to try to discern the truth, because it's really a cesspool of lies.
Yeah, discernment and wisdom really important in being able to kind of understand what's actually going on. We're so deeply immersed in layers and layers and layers of lies that it's wild. Like, and it's wild too. Like, even the languages that we speak have become traps. Like, they're spells in and of themselves. So it's pretty heavy how far we've fallen, so to speak.
Indeed, and to rely on also eyewitness testimony. Like, some of the most insightful information I've gotten about this election has been asking, you know, my friends in California, what was your actual experience? Mm-hmm. Asking my friends in Phoenix, which now Phoenix has become a center point of the contention around this election. Mm-hmm. What's your actual experience? You know, how many people do you know are Trump supporters versus Democrats in Phoenix? And what's coming through is that, you know, it really should have been a red wave. Mm-hmm. I mean, just look at the rally sizes and look at Biden's rally sizes. It's like the popularity was clearly with Trump, and the media can do whatever kind of black magic they want to try to convince people that Biden won. But, you know, people are not going to be happy with that, because a majority of them were definitely for Trump. And it's just we're not going to talk about the election right yet.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, we can start to get into it. We could talk a little bit about QAnon if you want, or kind of what led you to, I mean, you said that the Trump election back in 2016 kind of opened the door for you a little bit, but the Q map, kind of, how did you start to explore that kind of information? Like, what called you to that, I guess?
Well, so the Deep State Mapping Project began with the inauguration. I did a map called the List of Grievances, which was a pretty simple list. It was like a list format version of the QWeb with larger text. It was really only focused on the period from JFK through to the present of the main, what you would consider like conspiracies, what I would really call like CIA operations that are declassified, as well as crimes against humanity by corporations and international organizations. So that was the very first piece of the Deep State Mapping Project. And then that year I also did a Pizzagate, Watergate, Stargate map, sort of like, it was called the Gate map. It was a play on words in a way, but doing bullet points on those three different topics. So that was the second sort of major diagram. I was not very proactive that year, to be honest, like 2017, just because, you know, I knew that I didn't feel like this project really had a future. Like, I knew I was safe because Trump was president, but I didn't really feel like it would ever have gallery representation, which as an art project, that was sort of like the goal eventually. Mm-hmm. So it was really kind of a personal project. It was just what I wanted to work on in terms of my artistic creativity and expression, and also trying to spread truth in a way. I guess I'll mention that I had tried to be in this truth field before. I actually had the first InfoWars Facebook group. This is probably back in 2008 or so,
Nice.
before Facebook had even really taken off. And so that was my first social media project that passed 1,000 subscribers. And what happened with that was Obama was president, and it was a time period when a woman named Beverly Eckert, who was a 9/11 whistleblower, died in a plane crash, like shortly after she was either meant to speak with Obama or had spoken to Obama about getting truth for 9/11 disclosed. And then she died in a plane crash. And then shortly thereafter that, a plane crashed in the Hudson River right next to where I was working. Actually, people saw the plane floating down the river where I was working. And for some reason between those two events, I know they weren't necessarily directly connected to me being a truther, but those two events sort of scared me back into the truth closet. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to put my neck on the line at that point. And I just said, you know what, Obama's president, like, I don't want to have my name associated anymore with putting out truthful information. And also I was still working in the industry, the mainstream world of business, fashion industry, where everyone is a Democrat in the fashion industry and no one is a truther. And so it was, I was putting myself and my career on the line, putting my truth out there. And so I deleted all my photos from that group and left the group and don't know what became of it. I'm sure InfoWars eventually owned their own Facebook InfoWars group. And I'm not sure if they like bought mine out or just said like, no, we're the real InfoWars. Back then it was like the Wild West, anyone could just call themselves whatever they wanted on Facebook because not every business and name was already claimed. And so that was my first truther project. And I guess Deep State Mapping Project is my second one when I felt like I was a little bit more protected. So anyways, 2017, I created two sort of like diagrams that became like officially a part of the Deep State Mapping Project. And then QAnon came along in late October 2017. And it obviously meshed like perfectly with what I was kind of working on already. And it didn't really click for me until like a few weeks in that like this kind of weird that I'm like working on the Deep State Mapping Project and then this like huge disclosure operation is underway. And it was very synchronistically like aligned time-wise. But I basically just took QAnon's initial information and started just mapping it out. And what I was really trying to keep track of was the names and the dates and the names of these Saudi princes that were involved at the beginning of the QAnon period of information disclosures. Were some of the main reasons why I started the map, because I was just like, I can't keep track of like al-Balid, Muhammad al-Bin Salman, al-Balid bin Talal, the Saudi purge. I basically started it to keep track of all that information, but then I've always been interested in ancient aliens, ancient Egypt, and so I just took this timeline all the way back to the ancient period and, filled in most of the 20th century with research I had already known about. Most of this is 20th century, and then the pink and the blue are really the earlier period that led up to the 20th century. And so this was really the period that I didn't know as much about. And I obviously didn't struggle to fill it in, but the way I filled it in at first was a lot more like disjointed than how I fixed it in the following months after I had done a lot more research, that research which became the Cult of Baal and Sephiroth map. But that period from before the 20th century got a lot more refined into a very more specific timeline of events and key players and key organizations that formed a much more coherent picture. Because I was really sort of pulling at straws in this medieval period that I knew very little about before I started creating the QWeb. But it really covers everything. I mean, the green is the extraterrestrial section, which I've always been interested in my entire life. The purple is all false flags and MK Ultra operations that, every time there's a mass shooting, every time there's a bombing, this has a intention in terms of legislation that they want to push through and different types of agendas they want to push through. And then obviously 9/11 I had already done a ton of research on. So it was all pretty much already in my head, most of this. And then it all just came spilling out. So that's how the QWeb came together. And I shared it first on New Year's Eve 2018. Went viral. Everyone thought it had come from QAnon. My name has always been on it in the lower right corner, where artists always sign their work, surprisingly enough.
Yeah.
but there was still a lot of mystery around it. And I never called it the Q map initially. Everyone else started calling it that because they thought this was something that had come from the Q group. And I do feel like I might have some kind of like a psychic spiritual connection to the Q group, that I might be working with them like either in the future or like through some kind of wormhole, but there is no direct connection, at least in the physical plane, other than like some astral stuff. And so we're just sort of in line. And I think we're finding a lot of these synchronicities lately, like when we're just in tune to the same sort of vibration, we're all working on the same cause, eliminating the cabal and building a new earth, that, you know, we end up working on the same mission, and we can work on different parts of it separately, and then they just come together like a puzzle. And it's a beautiful thing when you're in alignment and you're in your own integrity, that's the way it works.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful thing that I was going to ask you as one of my questions is how does synchronicity play into your research and to the projects you've created? And you kind of just answered it a little bit.
Well, there's a lot more details on that for sure. Yeah, how synchronicity played in. Let's see, where do I begin? I think that summer of 2017. Let's see, when did I read let's see, I have it right here. Bringers of the Dawn. So it all started with this. I mean, no, I was into conspiracies before I researched Pleiadians, but this book, The Bringers of the Dawn, The Teaching of the Pleiadians, I think I must have read this actually in 2016, and it was very inspiring. I learned about the Pleiadians, I think, for the first time, and this kind of inspired me when I was going to visit my friend in Greece. I think this was 2017. I might be getting my years confused, but Barbara Marciniak, who channels the Pleiadians, had her sort of psychic awakening at Delphi in Greece.
Okay.
And so when I was visiting my friend, going to an island off of Greece, we specifically made a detour to Delphi because I was like, if I'm going to Greece, I have to see Delphi. And, you know, was kind of hoping to have my own little Pleiadian awakening. And we went to Delphi, and I did not have an immediate Pleiadian awakening of channeling, but I think that experience had a lasting effect. And I think that was right before I did the Q-Web. I might be getting my years mixed up. I might have read the book first and then did the Q-Web, but I was starting to get in touch with the Pleiadians, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And also on that trip to Greece, I had my first mantis encounter with an actual mantis on the island. And the mantises come in later. Like, they helped me with the energy map.
Okay.
Now I'm sounding crazy, but this is how synchronicities work. You know, the mantises, they always start showing up after you start thinking about them. It's really weird. And several other synchronicities. I mean, even on the Q-Web, the synchronicities of the way things are laid out. Like, if there was a gap between several words, I would just sort of Google the words, the two words in between or around the gap, and then I would find something, like some crazy way they were connected. Yeah. And it's just the way I laid it out. Somehow the word layout became very synchronistic. A lot of other synchronicities, like the way I get in contact with certain people that help me with the cult of Baal and the Sephiroth diagram. Just, you know, random like historians from New Zealand will reach out to me and have really interesting information. I worked with another guy named Mickey Magistus that helped me understand like this ancient Egyptian stuff, how these different societies migrated from the land of Israel area to Egypt back, and like who the original kings of Israel really were, King David, those characters. Not so much synchronicity there, but there's been a lot on the way. I can't recall everything at the moment, but it's always a lot of synchronicity and star alignments, you know, certain information falling into my lap. It's really, it feels like it's meant to be. Like it's kind of like God's work or divine inspiration.
Yeah.
Not saying that I'm God, but
yeah.
Well, we all are, you know, we're all facets of this deity. Eternal One, Law of One. I haven't read the Law of One. I'm more into the Pleiadian stuff because I think it's more pure of light. The Law of One, I've heard there might be some dark undertones, or some people get a little bit too caught up on the Law of One. And I'm not just caught up on the Pleiadians, but everything I've read from them has really resonated. and just felt like almost like I already knew it in a way. Like it's like I've already read it in a way. It's really weird. Like I'm actually reading my second pure Ashtar channel book right now by an older channeler from the 1950s, Ethel P. Hill.
Okay.
And it's written in a very different tongue than a lot of the channeling from the 80s. The channeling from the 50s from Ethel P. Hill, is that her name? Yeah, Ethel P. Hill, is written in much more of like sort of what sound like a biblical tongue with like the words doth a lot and like taketh. And, you know, when I first started reading this, I was like, am I going to understand this? Because it's really written in very esoteric rhetoric or tongue. What do you call that? Whatever. But I understood it perfectly. Like I've just like read through that whole book so quickly on this plane to Vegas just recently. And it makes perfect sense. I'm just like, yep. And I'm like 3/4 the way through it right now. But everything I've been reading from Ashtar is just like, yep, like already knew it, agreed. Not that I didn't need to read it, but it's a good reminder of just really not saying that we are, well, he is saying like, you know, we are protected, that we have like benevolent ETs watching over our planet, that there is higher guidance if you seek it out, that we're not alone, that there's other good in the universe, that it's not just this dark cabal that has all powerful control over everyone. And, you know, I'm not saying that they're going to intervene and just fix everything, because that's sort of like waiting for Jesus to come back. But they are actually saying that's basically what's up, that, you know, they're not going to let it get too out of hand. I definitely do believe that extraterrestrials have prevented nuclear Armageddon on this planet multiple times.
Yep.
And if they've done that, you know, there's no telling like what else they're willing to do to intervene. It is very similar to that Star Trek, what's it called, like the Universal Directive. I forget.
I'm not
but
sure.
That directive where, you know, a more advanced species is not allowed to just like land all their light ships on a primitive planet and be like, this is how it's going to be. This is our advanced technology. Here you go. Your society is fixed now. That's exactly how the Pleiadians operate, that, you know, they're not going to intervene overtly, but they will prevent planetary cataclysm. And I also think that extraterrestrials may have intervened in the Fukushima disaster of radiation leaking into the Pacific Ocean, that some of that might be getting cleaned up by extraterrestrials, especially with all the reports of extraterrestrial bases in the oceans, deep underground or deep underwater extraterrestrial bases have been heavily documented by a lot of different UFO reporting sightings. And, you know, if they're down there, I'm sure they would have an opinion about all this radiation being dumped into the ocean. Yeah. And I'm sure they have technology. You know, it's like cleaning up nuclear radiation is one of these things where it's like, really, like, we can't figure out any technology to fix this. It's sort of like, I don't know why they won't just admit that they can invent something to fix it, or maybe it is that difficult. But, you know, there is technology that can remedy nuclear radiation.
Well, I think even recently there's one of the free energy devices I've seen recently. I forget what it's called. I was trying to think about it. And maybe you've heard of it too. It's actually, what George Soros is one of the main like funders for it, and it's a device that's powered by waste.
By the spent plutonium rods?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
I read about that recently too, and I'm not sure where, but yeah, it's like we have all these spent plutonium rods in Yucca Mountain, deep underground, that are just like accumulating, much like how the dirty water is accumulating at Fukushima, and it's like we don't know what to do with it. Well, yeah, that's probably a valid power source if you have the right technology to use it. And there's so much we could do to make our world less polluted and cleaner. And for some reason, these Satanists in charge, like, they literally want to destroy the planet. It's a death cult, you know, and they're turning the entire planet into a human sacrifice ritual, especially if they can't have their little private rituals. If Trump has disrupted their satanic rituals where they do their blood rituals and blood drinking, they say, okay, well, guess what? We're going to turn the whole planet into our little death ritual. Yeah. And that's what it appears they're doing. And for some reason, they don't want to be constructive or progressive, and they don't want to build beautiful buildings. They want to just turn everything into a wasteland. I guess that's just the way archons operate.
Yeah, they have to leech off of the energy of others. But the whole thing is, like, if they destroy everyone, then where's their food source go? Or, like, what? It, like, has to be a certain point where they're like, okay, we've gone a little too far. We got to fix a few things here.
Yeah, that's what I wonder. Like, if you kill everyone, who you can have as slaves. And we were talking about this last night, and someone was, or my friend Ross was saying, well, they're going to have, robots as slaves. But I'm like, well, you know what? We actually already are the most advanced form of a robot. Mm-hmm. And so I guess they've just, like, lost control of us. Or maybe they want dumber robots. It really seems like I read Brave New World towards the beginning of all of this deep state mapping project. And the way they have the class system there with alphas, betas, deltas, gammas, epsilons, it really seems like they're trying to turn the human race into an epsilon race, or at least, the elites would be the alphas and everyone else is the epsilons. This is the same concept as the 1% versus having everyone else, just be impoverished. But the whole way that the system operated in Brave New World was by giving the fetuses more or less oxygen in the cloning tanks or growing tanks. No one was birthed anymore in the Brave New World. Everyone was grown in birthing factories, birthing centers. And the way they created the lower class was by depriving them of oxygen. And that created smaller, shorter people and also stupider people. And that's what I think the whole thing with the masks is trying to lower people's oxygen intake to literally make them stupider and less healthy. I think it's too late to make them shorter, but actually if you're a child in school wearing a mask, getting less oxygen, that could actually affect your height. And if you're pregnant wearing a mask, that could give you a fucked up baby for sure. And I've actually already heard actual testimony of secondhand accounts of people who have worn masks during pregnancy and their babies came out early, premature, or just fucked up in different ways. Because oxygen is very important to survival. I mean, you shouldn't need me to tell you this. It doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to know.
Well, and the mask thing too is interesting in regards to kind of what you were talking about earlier. There's the global ritual that's taking place. I've heard different talks of even in like what is it, Eyes Wide Shut? It's like everyone is wearing a mask. And that's part of the agreement of this. You become complicit in the ritual because you now are anonymizing yourself, and you're now a part of the collective whole. Like you're a part of that collective agreement, and in doing so, you are participating in any rituals that may be going on during that time period, essentially. So it's like a lot of these people are potentially participating in larger rituals that even maybe COVID itself is.
That makes perfect sense to me. That makes perfect sense to me for sure. And that's why more recently I switched to a face shield instead of a mask. I mean, I have some friends that refuse to wear a mask at all and just are like, sorry, I'm not wearing it. I guess I'm a little bit less confrontational, or like I just don't want to have a confrontation like that. And so I switched to one of these like clear face shields. And it's just a whole world of difference. Even though you still have some dumb shit on your face, it's like the fact that they can see your face, that they can see if you're smiling or like scowling or giving them the stink eye, which I don't usually in public. I'm usually smiling and trying to spread a good vibe. Yeah. But just having the face shield instead of the mask, like, had just such a different vibration. And because the mask is really dehumanizing. For sure. Yeah, it makes us kind of a part of that general populace, the chattel, or the cattle, I guess. I guess as the Zionists would say. Yeah, I was selling a mask with the Q-web on it. It was one of those like a tube of spandex style mask that would just like be like tight on your hole like a tube. And I discontinued it because I was like, fuck it, I'm not even supporting this program. Like, I don't even want to have a truther version of a mask. Like, yeah, I would sell a cool face shield, but that requires plastic molding and stuff, so it's too complicated. But yeah. So I guess we've kind of started to scratch on a little bit of the political stuff, a little bit of the Q stuff, and then getting into the masks and stuff. Have you gotten too heavy into like terrain theory versus germ theory or any of that kind of stuff in any research? Or yeah, I know all about that. I actually did a lot of research on AIDS and lymphoma before I even did the healing web. So the COVID thing came around, I was just like, oh my God, like this guy again. Because like I had studied Fauci extensively in terms of all the scandal, inconsistencies, contradictions revolving around the AIDS epidemic. So to see him come back and actually have credibility in the public sphere was just like horrifying. I mean, absolutely horrifying, knowing full well. I mean, it's almost like studying, or if you're from a mainstream perspective, it's like studying 9/11 and, you know, thinking Osama bin Laden is responsible for everything. And then another terrorist attack comes around and like we're asking Osama bin Laden like to fix it. It's just like, no, like it's so wrong. And I mean, I'm shocked that Anthony Fauci was even still in the NIH under Trump, because he's like classic swamp creature. I mean, he's responsible, if he's responsible for continuing the AIDS epidemic, like he already has the blood of millions on his hands. And he wasn't the one who really kicked it off. That was Robert Gallo in the US. But he's definitely like the second in line in terms of people you come upon in your research of the AIDS epidemic. And it's a total botch. I mean, yeah, they switched it from being a death sentence to a lifelong treatment plan in around 1996, when another scientist, David Ho, created antiviral cocktail therapy instead of this one pill AZT, which was literally killing people faster than the virus itself. So, I mean, they were killing people with medicine faster than the virus itself for a good, like 16 years before they actually found a therapy that was a lifelong treatment plan that actually kept people alive longer than if it is a virus or whatever it is was killing people. But yeah, the whole germ versus terrain theory is very interesting. And I actually was just saying in my speech in Las Vegas that the entire discipline of virology, I consider it to be a mystery school, because unless you own an electron microscope and can look down there and say, Robert Gallo, Dr. Fauci, like I'm going to contradict what you're saying, that it's almost the same thing as the Inquisition and accusations of witchcraft, because we are fighting an invisible enemy. At the end of the day, it's an invisible enemy that every picture you've seen of COVID-19 on the media is a computer rendering. And there's not even an 100% consensus that these things even really exist. I mean, bacteria and bacterial infections you can look at under a regular microscope. You know, their cells, you can see them crawling around. Viruses can only be viewed under an electron microscope. And when you actually view them, they look pretty much nothing like the computer renderings. And I'm not going to say viruses don't exist, because that can get you into a whole lot of trouble. And there is a lot of evidence that there's something smaller than bacteria that can cause disease. But there's a lot of validity in the germ versus terrain theory, and that a lot of diseases that have been blamed on germs or microbes were actually the result of environmental toxicity and pollutants and poisoning. And for some reason, you know, even with the global warming debate, everyone wants to talk about temperature, carbon emissions. No one in the mainstream ever wants to talk about chemical pollutants and environmental contamination. And it's just a way for big corporations to continue putting these things out, you know, from PCBs to Agent Orange to thalidomide. There's just a whole laundry list of chemicals that have been produced in the past 120 years that have just caused devastation to human life and the whole planet, animal life and the environment. And all these things are pretty much brushed under the rug. I mean, occasionally one of them will slip into the mainstream as like a big scandal, but then most of the time they just continue using it, you know. Even still in the US, you know, we use poisons for food coloring, we use poisons for preservatives, and it's allowed by the FDA. So it's really fucked up. And I think that I keep saying COVID is really a multi-pronged attack on humanity, that I think there is a biological weapons aspect that might involve a virus. There's a chemical warfare aspect. There's a electromagnetic warfare aspect. There's a propaganda warfare aspect. There's definitely a psychosomatic, fear-induced illness aspect. And then there's also just blatant fraud and mislabeling of cause of death. You know, I think a great number of these COVID deaths, when you look at that 230,000 death count, has been people that just either died of the flu, died of 100 other things that were just labeled COVID posthumously, died of car accidents labeled COVID, died 10 years ago labeled COVID, like a cat died labeled COVID. So this number 230,000 is just totally insane. I've seen other graphs where the flu numbers for this season have dropped to pretty much zero because all the flus are being labeled COVID now. And it's just like there's no distinction between the two. And they have literally destroyed the entire world's economy and even the entire world's culture over what is predominantly a normal flu season. Now, there are certain cases of COVID where it has been something different, something much more extreme, something where people are brought to hospitals turning blue before they even get to the hospital, which that is definitely not the common cold. But for, I would say, majority of the COVID cases that we've seen, it's, for all intents and purposes, does sound like the common cold, and people are just freaking out about it.
It's wild how just a little bit of psychological warfare can go a long way.
Oh, yeah. It's not a little bit of psychological warfare, though. I mean, it's a highly organized and effective operation being run globally.
Well, that speaks to what you're saying, is like, this is not just the United States, this is a global thing. And part of the fear of it happening globally is what instilled it for everyone else. It's like, if it was just happening in one country, like, or even just two countries, the fear wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, somehow they got it going in every single country, and I think that has to do with just the fact that globalization has largely already happened, and that every country that's connected with, like, the IMF and the WHO and the UN, all their politicians are bought Rockefeller stooges. And I just want to hold up, this is the next book I'm reading. It's called COVID-19, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum.
Oh, wow.
And this just lays out the fact that pretty much, I mean, he's not going to admit that they planned it, but they have planned for this epidemic to do an entire economic reset and a cultural reset where, they don't want storefronts anymore. They pretty much want everyone locked in their homes, working from the computer, being exposed to whatever EMFs they want to put through this Zoom system. And I haven't read the book yet, and I've heard it's very horrifying. Like, I did read an RT article about this book, but this whole thing has been planned out by these people in Switzerland and the World Economic Forum. I just can't emphasize that enough. And they're real sickos. I mean, look at this guy, Klaus Schwab. He looks like Dr. Evil.
Yeah, that's wild.
So that's the next book I'm reading, and I think I will definitely gain a lot of insight because what I've learned through all my research is that these Illuminati, they always put out a book or a publication basically explaining their whole plan before they do it. The one that really comes to mind in terms of the AIDS epidemic and a lot of other things is Henry Kissinger's National Security Memorandum. Let's see, it's on the QWeb. Well, I don't have the actual number, but if you look up like the famous Henry Kissinger National Security Memorandum, it basically lays out the plan for depopulation, which was previously explained by the Club of Rome, rather. The Club of Rome put out the initial studies on, we have too much population, we got to start getting rid of people. That was in like the 1960s. And then I guess it's like right after the baby boom, they were like, ooh, we had too many babies. And there's been several different globalist-oriented publications. Actually, Ross was telling me last night that Obama had a science czar. I wrote down his name in my phone. I don't know. I'm sure if you look up Obama's science czar, you'll see that it was some guy that came from universities in Austin who he was installed by Obama, and after he was in office or installed by Obama, people were looking up papers he had written in his, professional professor career, and he had been calling for epidemics using Ebola to decrease the population. Literally in his papers was like asking for it or saying we needed it, and maybe not saying he's going to do it, but like he had just written some horrifying stuff. And I just heard about this last night, so I'm not an expert on that subject, but I think it's worth looking into. But they've put out their plans several times. Oh yeah, what was that? And it's not a secret.
In 2010, the Rockefeller Institute put out a big paper that had the lockstep stuff in it. I forget what that one was called.
Mm.
You know what I'm referring to?
Not exactly, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Um,
I mean, they've put it out privately, like almost as redundantly as the mainstream media puts out a different narrative to people on the mainstream news every day, but they never really delve into what's being exposed. And I guess you call it like the white papers of these organizations that operate in pseudo secrecy. You know, it's secrecy in the fact that it's not reported by the media, but it's actually open source, a lot of it. And so, I mean, it makes you wonder, like, what their plans are that are actually kept secret, because if the plans they're putting out publicly are this horrifying, you know, they put a whole book out that's basically like not admitting that they created it, but if they have a whole plan that they're like acting like it's going to be beneficial, that they've organized, it's like, yeah, obviously they were behind the origin of it to begin with.
and it's already in print and already, like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of, I think, what is it called? Hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the ritual aspect, I think, too. And I feel like it's part of just the rules of this reality in general, is that the powers that be have to tell the people what's happening, whether it be through scientific journals, books, or even Hollywood or TV or whatever you want to call it. Like, they have to kind of show you what's going to happen, and therefore making you complicit again in the rituals, in the aspects of things that you now add that manifestation, your own manifestation powers to it unwittingly.
It's just amazing to me how many people won't even listen, though. I mean, even when the information's out there, even when it's right in front of them. I mean, the fact that they're claiming Biden got the most votes ever in the history of all time, when the past 3 weeks have been coming out that his son's a meth addict, that he, you know, took all of this money from Russia and China, basically used his son as like a money mule. And, you know, was doing all this favoritism through like family favors, nepotism. None of that mattered to people. They were just so brainwashed by Orange Man Bad, Trump's a narcissist, with no real data to back it up.
Yeah.
I mean, my main thing with Trump is that he did not do the war in Iran. He didn't invade Iran. Like, to me, that's like a success for a president. And, you know, we've even seen a lot of improvement in our own country, at least, you know, if you can trust these economic numbers and job numbers, that it was going really well until COVID. And even still, you know, the fact that we didn't start a new war in the Middle East is a huge achievement for me. Almost the main achievement as president. That's what the president's job is supposed to be, to protect the nation and to be in charge of war if we do go to war. And for him to end this endless war in the Middle East, or at least sort of like put it on pause, because I know he did do a lot of weapon sales to all the countries in the Middle East, and that's one thing people criticize him for. But, you know, if we can at least switch from our own wars to like proxy wars, that's at least a step, you know, a step towards ending the wars and the unneeded destruction in that region.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And yeah, like you're saying, no one's willing to do the research because they've become so inundated with nonsense that it's like, why? It's just shocking. And even people who I've seen as being like fringe conspiracy theorists, or like, there's a lot of people that I used to see as being kind of on the edge that are getting pulled into the narratives just as much as anyone else. And I'm just kind of like blown away by it.
Yeah, there were people who I thought, you know, that I had met in the past 3 years that had, you know, corresponded with me, and I kind of thought they understood what I was working on, that they understood that, you know, it is all this mirage put out by the media. And even Trump, you know, I'm not 1,000% pro-Trump, but with everything that's going on, like, he's really the only rational way forward if we're only given two options. He's not the perfect candidate in my book by any means, but I do think we need someone who was brash and who was able to destroy the cabal system. And, you know, we don't need this little love and light spirit like Jill Stein, who I voted for. Like, she couldn't have done anything even if she got in. We needed someone who had authority, who had I guess I shouldn't say masculinity, but for what needed to be done, I think you did need to have the masculinity to counter all these hyper-masculine Illuminati patriarchs. Then, of course, there is also the mothers of darkness behind all those patriarchs, the witch covens of the Illuminati that I think really do control a lot of the men in the Illuminati. But, you know, we needed someone who was rude, someone who could just, like, snub the globalists and someone who is going to really upset the system and start destroying it, dismantling it. And I don't know to what extent Trump has done that. It did seem like he made a lot of progress, but if he falls out of power now, then it could all be reversed really quickly. And I do think they still have a plan. Like, I'm trying to not lose faith in the plan, but I don't really see how allowing Biden to fully win and then try to reverse it in the courts is a better plan than just fixing the election before it even happened. Not fixing the election, but enabling or constructing the means to have a valid election.
Yeah, I was shocked that there wasn't a blockchain solution provided. Like, even the United States Postal Service filed a patent for blockchain voting systems about 2 or 3 months ago. And I was like, sure. I was like, okay, they're going to release this out, and then there's no way to do voter fraud at that point. But they didn't, and I'm kind of shocked at that that didn't happen.
Maybe, I what I'm seeing is that there's been so much fraud and corruption on this election that there's really not even going to be any way to do a recount. And so we might have to actually do a revote. And maybe then we'll use this blockchain system. That's what Charlie Ward had been saying, that's going to be what happens, that we're going to do the regular election. There's going to be so much fraud that it's canceled. And then we're going to do a quantum voting system that will use that new blockchain system. And I hope that happens. Like, we're in really uncharted territory here, because it seems like once the media calls the election, like, it's over. And I don't know that Trump will be able to use the courts to get all this other stuff done. That's a very complicated procedure. And I could definitely see that if we do try to do another election with a quantum system, a blockchain system that's not hackable, that the Democrats will just say, no, we already had an election, Biden won, we're not going to vote again, period. I could completely see that happening. And then, of course, when Trump wins the election system that's unhackable, everyone's going to just say, oh, well, this was all rigged for Trump. And it's really frustrating because, I know Republicans have rigged elections in the past. The 2000 election was clearly rigged by George Bush in Florida. That's even been admitted to. And so, when Republicans now accuse the Democrat candidate of rigging the election, the Democrats, I'm specifically referring to my mother, but I'm sure this conversation has been had across the whole nation. They're just like, oh, well, you're just saying that it was rigged because your candidate didn't win. And I'm like, no. Like, they don't even want to look at the facts. All they want to do is get who they consider to be the dictator, Hitler, out of power. And they don't care about facts, or they don't care about, evidence. They don't care about voter fraud. If they get the candidate they want winning, then they don't care how it happened. And I don't even think Trump supporters would stoop that low. I really think that the majority of Trump supporters really do want a fair election. And I don't even know why Biden's the candidate to begin with. If it was a fair run up to the election, like, we wouldn't even have like the two fucking idiots running.
Yeah, it's pretty ludicrous.
And I don't even know. I'm just trying to figure out when we even vote on state governors, because I didn't even know, like, I sound so ignorant right now, but I didn't even know the whole system of, like, states had governors and, like, the governors make all the calls before COVID. Like, all of a sudden COVID happened, and it's like, all of a sudden we have a governor that can fucking mandate you stay in your house and close your business and possibly mandate a mandatory vaccine. That was pretty shocking. And city council members as well that are corrupt, city council leaders. And I want to know when we vote on these city council people and the governor, because I've never been informed of that type of an election in my life. It's always just been the presidential election. It's never like, oh, you better vote for your state governor, or they might shut down your entire state and livelihood over an imaginary virus. Like, that seems pretty important. And these governors are just as corrupt as the politicians in DC. And I want to know when we vote for them, and I want to vote them out.
Yeah, there's I was going to say, there's a whole layer of the political world, like, as I've been looking at it from the perspective, again, of blockchain and of these different ways, and I look at Trump as kind of more of a chaos mechanism to allow us to see the faults and to allow us to kind of come in and have these conversations, to be able to rethink what's really going on at the local level, though. Like, bring it back in, reel it all back in, bring it back localized, figure out how the corruption is starting here, even wherever you're at. And get people the ability to take control of politics at their local level again. which I think is what the original intention was.
I know he was all about deregulating this whole time. You know, for every law he put on the books, he took off 3 or something.
Mm-hmm. Something I thought that was interesting. I had a friend post like, I hope that Biden wins, because then all of these people will see how much of a mistake they made and kind of have to eat their own words. Because if Biden does win and things get worse, then it's just, okay, well, you all made this decision. And then it really goes to like the shattering of everything, potentially.
I don't know how you rebuild it after that, though, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure
I guess either. I don't even know if they would really see, because a lot of these people, they do want more masks. They do want vaccines. They probably, if they want the vaccine, they probably want it mandatory for everyone. They don't understand what sovereignty is. They don't understand what freedom and rights are. Yeah. And they want to be Nazis, even though they're part of Antifa. It's really twisted and crazy and upside down world right now.
Oh, for sure.
I don't see any benefit to Biden winning, honestly. Like, I mean, I guess everything that happens will happen for a reason, as they say, but that's not the timeline that I want to choose.
For sure. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, actually. How familiar are you with the sovereignty stuff and with the quantum economic stuff? Have you researched that much, or?
A little bit. I mean, I was just talking with my friend Ross last night, who we have a new friend named Ian, who is deeply into dissolving your federal citizenship and becoming either a state citizen or even like sovereign somehow. Mm-hmm. He's been to jail several times. He's been to court several times. And apparently now they fear him because he has so much knowledge of this legality system that, like, cops can't pull him over. His tags are expired. Cops can't pull him over because he's dealt with that already. And like, if he does get arrested, he like writes up a contract in the back of the cop car. It's some crazy stories. Like, he writes up a contract in the cop car, and like they're legally obligated to like pay him to be in jail or some shit. Like, so there's ways to do it. I don't want to have to go to jail to figure it out. Mm-hmm. I'm not personally that invested in dissolving my federal citizenship and figuring all that stuff out. I mean, maybe later in life, but at this point, it's not my top priority. And I'm running my own business. Like, I pay taxes if I make profit, which, I can obviously massage my expenses so that it's like minimize that, which is what every business does. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a problem with paying some taxes. I do think that taxes in a way make sense to an extent. Like, someone needs to maintain the roads, which is not even happening. Yeah. I mentioned briefly that the section of the interstate right near me, which is a very populated and affluent part of Cincinnati, has been under construction since before 2016. And I thought Trump might be able to get that finished, but no, it's just not a long section of the interstate, but it's apparently like they're installing some kind of like fusion reactor in there that they can't figure out, because it's just like they cannot figure out how to finish this one section of the interstate. But that's why taxes are important, to have some sort of tax. And funding the army, obviously we need to be able to defend our country. Mm-hmm. Even though I do think that is overfunded. But so that's where I'm at sovereignty. Like, maybe eventually try to become a state citizen or whatever that thing is. There's whole books about that kind of stuff that I haven't read. Mm-hmm. This guy Ian, we know, is obviously the expert. My friend Ross is more invested in learning about it from Ian and through his own research. Mm-hmm. But like the whole lawyer stuff, court system, does not interest me like at all.
Quantum grammar.
Yeah, my thing is just to try to avoid that as much as possible. We always had some kind of a energy fluctuation in my house. Oh, wow. And sovereignty, and what's the other one? The quantum financial system, or what?
Yeah, quantum. Well, there's the quantum grammar. There's the quantum grammar, or the quantum financial system, which is kind of linked in with, I think, the Nisara stuff. Mm-hmm.
What's quantum grammar?
Quantum grammar is the systems that are being built by David Wynn Miller and Russell J. Gould. Have you heard of them? Mm-mm. Okay. So they're apparently working, and this is probably in line too with kind of what Charlie Ward was talking about. Russell J. Gould claims to be the Postmaster General of the world, and that along with all of this reset, he has come in and built all these contracts using quantum grammar to essentially reset the entire system from the perspective of shipping and receiving. And then it has to do as well with birth certificates and a lot of the occult. Can you still hear me? Okay, you muted. Okay.
I'm typing what you're saying, so I'm always taking notes on people, and so I don't want to be like while you're talking.
So it's a really fascinating system that I think is linked into the Nasara Jasara and the quantum systems, because it's the quantum grammar system that's going to replace the legal system. So it's all new contracts, all new linguistics that kind of dismantle the old kind of occult systems that are run mostly by these Zionist lawyers out of New York that kind of built a lot of the linguistics around our system that create it has to do with the sovereignty as well, because you have your birth certificate, which essentially enslaves you into a bond that you're then indebted to, essentially, that's owned by the Vatican, and like all these different layers. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about a lot of that. I haven't really researched it enough to speak on it like eloquently, but there's definitely a lot there. And the whole thing with like the Bar Association, that like the B in the Bar Association of America stands for British. And so our attorneys are accredited through the British Crown royalty. On top of that, we have those laws that you can't be a noble in America. It's illegal, but apparently, we're still part of their royalty system. And it's all messed up. And the fact that I think the whole world is under maritime law connects to the Postmaster General. That's something I've been wanting to do more research on, that this idea that the Postmaster General is somehow like the highest commander in the entire world, that we're all under maritime law, which means we're like sea assets.
Yep.
Ross wants me to do a whole diagram on that. So I'm trying to understand. That might be something in the future that I'm going to look into more, because it's definitely something interesting. But something I was realizing recently, just last night actually, I guess I had a lot happen last night, keeping like conversations last night. Because I talked to New Templars and I talked to my friend Ross, and I like to talk to really wise people that do their own research and are deep thinkers. And so just a few conversations can spark a lot of different ideas going forward.
For sure.
But what I was thinking last night was, part of my Vegas trip was, before we left Vegas to go to Area 51, we visited Switch Data Center, which Charlie Ward has said is going to be the location of the servers that host the quantum financial system.
Okay.
So this area was sort of on the southwestern side of Las Vegas, not very far from the airport. And we drove up to it. It's a bunch of, huge warehouses that have these weird, like, red triangular, like, docking stations. And it's all protected by gates. You can't even get near it. They say, you're being monitored with video and audio. You can't pass the gate. There's not even a parking lot before you get to a gate. And we drove around to what we thought was the front door of the place. And even that wasn't welcoming. It was gates and these like 5G signs that have the Switch logo with like 5G. So I guess they're using 5G there somehow. I think there were towers coming out. There was at least 3 different large warehouse buildings, and there was towers coming out of each of them that had those like circular radio transmission things, transmitters, I guess, to communicate between the different warehouses. And so they're using 5G to communicate between the warehouses. But what I realized last night was that all this infrastructure that has been built, like, I think that the infrastructure is there in terms of 5G, in terms of these data centers, to utilize either a Jasara type system where it's beneficial to society, or the social credit system, the Chinese system, the digital currency, digital wallet, that would really be enslaving us and giving us very much limited sovereignty in terms of financial stuff. And that's what we don't want. And so I really see that it could go either way, that they've built this infrastructure. It can go either way depending on who's in charge. And maybe then even if someone came on later, it could go back the other way. So we could have 4 years of total enslavement and non-sovereignty, and then maybe people fucking wake the hell up and go back to something better after that.
Kanye West comes in.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he would do a great job after he comes back from like the MK Ultra programming center with another bleached blonde hair job. But yeah, it's hopeful, and it's also concerning because this infrastructure is in place, and it just depends on how we use it and who's in charge of it.
Yeah, and then you have Starlink as well with Elon Musk and what he's doing, and that's gaining a lot of ground. It's already being used in a lot of places.
People are already getting their internet from Starlink.
Yep. And they're starting with a lot of the tribes, the native tribes.
Oh, just what they need.
Exactly. And I'm just like, okay, well, interesting choice there.
That's so weird. Yeah. Well, I feel like they're really trying to target like spirituality lately, and they're trying to destroy like the ancient wisdom and the spirituality that's really in tune with nature. They canceled our Serpent Mound solstice festivals. I mean, they've canceled all festivals. Like, you know, like most concerts and festivals aren't really of a spiritual nature, but that's where people go for recreation and to connect and have a good time. And they've really like ended fun and recreation during this COVID thing. It really seems like almost on purpose. I mean, if we can go to a grocery store and shop, like why can't you go to a concert, especially if you wear a mask or even socially distance? But a lot of these concerts have been just completely canceled.
Yeah.
And festivals and expos.
Yeah.
I mean, expos were the main thing that I'm missing.
And meanwhile, there's companies like Wave VR, which are doing digital concerts, are raising $60 million or whatever to do the whole next wave of virtual reality concerts.
Well, who's going to digital concerts? Like, do people actually go to those things?
Apparently, yeah. They did a collaboration with The Weeknd and TikTok. So they did like a whole
I guess if you listen to that
TikTok
music.
push and yeah. But it's happening, which is really fascinating too in its own right.
Well, you know, I've heard those virtual reality goggles, they're really a trip. Like Deep Time his son had a pair, and he was like, you won't believe it. Like, it's so crazy. And I mean, I guess I'll try it, but, you know, I think it's going to hurt your eyes. Like, you're going to be in an EMF bath the whole time. I mean, the longer I do these Zoom conferences, like the sicker I feel. And I guess I'm more sensitive than a lot of people in terms of EMF and a lot of different things, chemicals.
Yeah.
So I might be more sensitive and more adverse to just like completely submitting to this digital system where we're literally like chained to our computer like this. You can't do anything in the world without like literally just sitting at the desk on your ass, just getting fatter and fatter.
Yeah.
But some people don't have a problem with that, I guess. And I know a lot of kids, like on this trip to Vegas, I went to a friend's house and they had 2 kids that were home and they were doing digital learning, and I didn't even see them because they were just in their rooms with the doors closed. And a lot of kids are doing that. And their mother told me that the one of them, they wanted to do digital learning before this COVID thing even happened. And I think they'd already done it for like a semester or so before COVID. And you know, I can completely see why kids would want to do that. I mean, when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was be on the computer and play Super Mario, and I loved the computer. But I think that computers have gotten a lot more creepy recently. You know, I still like computer and I still like video games. I don't play video games anymore, but because I'm too busy trying to survive and like making business and send out newsletters and shit. But, you know, computers used to be a lot of fun, and like they kind of just made them creepy. Like, it's getting more and more creepy every day, the more further we get into this time period. And I wish they could go back to fun computers and fun digital learning, but I don't think that should be the only thing. Like, it's just too weird that people actually are like accepting this. They don't want to have any physical interaction. It's going towards transhumanism, which is what we all expected. The conspiracy theorists were right again.
Techno-Luciferianism.
Yeah, it's like, you're going to ruin your eyes. Like, I don't know.
Definitely. Ruin your eyes.
I gotta move around.
Ruin the energy just of your body. And that's something I noticed too, is like the healthier I get personally, like I'm on my own healing journey, I think, and the healthier I'm eating, the better I'm taking care of myself, the more I notice the energies, the food, the water, these types of things, and it becomes really clear. The clearer you get, the clearer it becomes, essentially, about how poisoned we really are.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, one thing I've noticed since COVID is that, before COVID, I was still eating Chipotle semi-often and like going to restaurants semi-often. After COVID, I went through a long period of just eating at home, just going to the grocery store or the farmer's market or the local farm. and cooking for myself, only buying grass-fed meat, only buying organic fruits and vegetables, filtered water. And when I started going to restaurants again after this COVID thing had been active for a few months, like I literally, after I came home from these restaurants, felt like I had been poisoned, because I know restaurants, they don't give a shit about organic unless you go to a specific organic restaurant, which they only have those in like a few places in New York and California, crazily. That these restaurants, they're just serving pretty much like whatever will taste enough decent that you like enjoy the meal, but then it's like not good food,
Yeah, for sure.
And I really, I've wished for years that we could have bars that served healthy like green juices and juices at bars, and restaurants that served organic, or not just restaurants, but fast food restaurants that would have healthy organic food. And I mean, I think could be the future. Like, I don't know what people intend to eat when like all they do is sit on Zoom all day, but
little pellets that get printed out by their protein machine.
Well, I'm all for like futuristic food as well, as long as it's healthy, because I know like from my research into Ashtar and the Pleiadians, like they say that as your vibration goes higher and higher, you go to a more liquid diet, and when you're at a certain point, like you're only feeding off of energy itself.
Yeah.
And so if we want to talk diet for a second, like, since my healing web, I learned about the carnivore diet, and I'm on sort of a combination of like the vegan and carnivore diet, which makes no sense. But basically I eat like a lot of raw eggs, green juice, and tartare, which is raw meat with some like mustard and flavorings in it. A few other things as well. Like I do still eat some bread. Like I don't think I have a gluten allergy, which a lot of people have, gone away from gluten, especially in the past 15 years or so.
Yeah.
I don't really think I have a gluten allergies, but I'm eating right now Ezekiel bread. I like Dave's Killer bread too, but I just eat a little tiny bit of that. Like basically taking the food pyramid and in a way, like I guess flipped it upside down a little bit, like just not having sugar be the bottom of it. But the only sugar I eat is kind of like honey, because I do feel like, if I don't have any sugar, like I start like losing my mind, like I need something. And so the way I get sweets is through honey and lemon juice is the two main things, and fruit. Yeah.
Do you do dates?
No, that's too sweet.
Okay, I was gonna say that's a good if you're looking for a sweetener. And then stevia is okay as well, but that has a weird flavor to it as well.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if I have an allergy to stevia and stuff like that. Those like monk fruit and erythritol.
Okay.
I just got a chapstick when I was at Area 51 at the Little Alien that has stevia in it, and like this is so delicious. Like I just want to like eat it. And it's pina colada flavored.
Nice.
But like there's options out there. It's just anything with like the white sugar or white carbs is like the worst, and it causes cancer. So I'm already on like a cancer prevention diet. I've thought I had cancer several times throughout my life, even though I never had it. But even recently, like I had like an issue in my throat where I thought I had thyroid cancer just like about a month ago, and it happened to be that I was just smoking too much weed, because I had switched from vaping to smoking with fire, and I knew that would irritate me, but I didn't like put the two together until I finally just figured it out. But I started taking iodine because if it's a thyroid issue, that it's iodine supposed to help that, and I'm taking the X2 Infowars iodine. And it's funny, like everyone's on different supplements, or at least people that are woke and trying to be health conscious are on different supplements, and they think that certain minerals are like essential for them, and everyone has a different opinion. But it's like certain people find like one thing and then they stick with it and they think it's doing something, but it might not be doing anything, or it might be doing something. But I'm on an interesting set of supplements, not a ton of supplements, but a few different things. And, it changes over time. And I definitely have a lot of supplements that I take in the instance that I would start feeling like I'm getting a cold or COVID. I don't think I've had COVID yet, but my mom got a COVID test. And since I had heard that the tests were contaminated, and then she felt like she was getting a cold like 2 days after the test. And so then I had a mega panic attack. And I didn't really get sick, but I felt really weird. It might have been all panic, like it literally might have been psychosomatic, that fear-induced anxiety. Yeah. But I started doing MSM for a couple days, Miracle Mineral Supplement, which you're not allowed to talk about because it's, I don't know if it's like poison or not, but it tastes a little bit like pool water, but they say it can cure literally anything. It was mainly for malaria. Was like one of the diseases that it was mainly not prescribed for, but used for treatment of. And then people were saying that it could probably treat COVID. So I went on that for a couple of days, and I got better. If I wasn't even sick, I don't even know if I was sick or just panicking, but I got better from that. And so I have a lot of things. Like if I start getting a cold, I start taking garlic, pau de arco, olive leaf, oil of oregano. And then I have another parasite elixir that I do sometimes it's even for a spiritual parasite. But since I'm eating so much tartar and raw eggs, like I've been eating tartar and raw eggs for 2 years now, and I have never gotten sick once from it. Okay, not once. I've gotten sick from restaurant food several times. And alcohol a few times as well. But it's like people are so scared of raw animal products, and it's all fucking fear mongering. I mean, every single piece of meat comes with that warning label, like you have to cook this to this number of degrees or you will die. And like even fish, like people will eat raw fish at a sushi restaurant, but they think that buying raw fish and eating it is some kind of like deadly sin. It's the same fucking fish. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll get really sick eventually and bite my own words, but like I said, I've been eating raw eggs and meat for 2 years and feel absolutely great. I mean, I felt like starting eating the tartar really brought back a lot of color in my face. The color of this webcam like varies. Like sometimes it looks very orange and then it switches to very green tone, like you probably noticed throughout this recording. But my color and my health has improved a lot since I switched my diet up, and definitely recommend it to really anyone, because it's not... everyone's body is a little bit different. They respond differently to different things. But certain things I really think could be good for literally almost everyone. I mean, some people might have a specific allergy to some. My stepsister recently said she has an allergy to chicken. I'm like, that's impossible. Like, there's no way you have an allergy to chicken. But I think, eggs are really almost like the perfect source of food and protein for humans. That it's almost like a little godsend. It's like a little package that the avians, made for us. And I don't even know what the question was originally, but I just went off on a little health tangent. Hopefully, my goal is to heal people, make them healthier, live longer, better lives. So I try to share my wisdom as much as I can.
Yeah, I personally have, and I kind of wanted to question you a little bit about this, because I've, personally, I'm on the road towards liquidarian or fruitarian, and I've given up all meat, but I've seen this really interesting trend that's happening within veganism, kind of fitting more into this kind of more Luciferian doctrine kind of stuff, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, if any type of veganism is okay, I would say it's fruitarian, because that's at least natural products. That these people who go vegan and they're buying like vegan cheese and going to vegan restaurants making like vegan cheese concoctions. I mean, I don't even tell you, like the vegan McDonald's burger and Impossible Burger shit is just like totally whack. But there is definitely some truth and validity to possibly being fruitarian, and but there's a lot of pitfalls out there in the vegan world. Yeah,
it seems like they want people to move more into veganism, but like you're saying, it's the processed veganism, and it's that I feel like it's better to just eat meat from a real source than it is to eat these like chemical conglomerations or whatever, like amalgamations of random stuff.
I think like in the future, when we have an FDA and a food industry we can trust, that growing meat in a laboratory could be a very viable option, especially if we move on to like spaceships, light ships in outer space, that's definitely even more of an option. And maybe the optimal diet is like, this is my sort of philosophy, is that the optimal diet would be this type of a purple juice, which is green juice combined with basically like blood. It could be blood grown in a lab or wherever on a spaceship, and you just take this little like purple juice like shot glass a few times a day, and like that's your diet. So it's definitely we're both like progressive thinkers in terms of like what diet could be, And the diet that the FDA pushes on people is just completely whack. The grocery store is just completely full of poison.
Yeah.
All the food that's easy to reach for, that's like you're hungry, want to reach for something without cooking, it's always going to be shit, if it's like potato chips or whatnot. So people really need to wise up and find what's best for their body, what they need. I mean, I have a really high metabolism, which is I think why veganism didn't work as well for me. Also some like other health conditions that I'm really trying to like rebuild my body more actively. I'm always trying to gain weight actually. I lift. I don't know if you can see my weights back there. But I've always been struggling to gain more weight my entire life. So I have a very different metabolic situation than I think most Americans. And so because I'm always trying to gain weight, that's why I'm trying to eat more meat, eggs and stuff, and it digests better for me. But whatever works for whatever people. I follow people on Instagram who are fruitarian that have a great body, and it's definitely if you want to lose weight, like try vegan for a few months, and unless you do vegan completely wrong, then it should be helpful for losing weight. So
yeah,
it's all about your goals, where you are in life, your other conditions.
100%.
And avoiding the chemicals. I mean, it's crazy to me just like how many people don't even look at the ingredients on things. When I guess I learned that a while ago, but even my parents don't even look at the ingredients on things, and they raised me to eat a pretty healthy diet, but they still don't look at ingredient lists.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if there's stuff on that ingredient list that's things you can't pronounce and chemicals, then it's probably a good idea to avoid that.
Well, even the one thing I've been noticing that is in pretty much everything that I'm not so sure about is canola oil.
Yeah, that's one that I'm avoiding.
Everything.
That I don't know 100% if it's good or bad, but I think part of the reason that most of America is so like overweight is because of fried oils. Like something about frying animal oils, it just doesn't feel right. Like having been like doing raw stuff for so long, anytime now that I start cooking and putting stuff on a pan and seeing those bubbles, like something just is like a warning sign to me, like intuitively, that something is not right that's happening,
Yeah.
that it's proteins getting destroyed, denatured. I also think a lot of the reason for the obesity epidemic is that a lot of the cheese in our country is actually plastic, and that the body can't digest that plastic, and so it just stays in your body and it gets stored. That's sort of like I don't know if that's a wacky theory or something, but
yeah, that's interesting. That's definitely interesting.
It's hard. Like I definitely sympathize with people who struggle with their weight, because it's something I've never had to deal with. Like I struggle to gain weight, and I know it's a really challenge for a lot of people, and that there is genetic factors as well, but there's also it's a heavy dietary factor. Like there can be genetic factors, but the main thing is the diet you've had throughout your whole life. So just about breaking those habits. I mean, I've given up stuff. I liked candy corn, I liked Jolly Ranchers and Gushers, but I've given all that up. Except for on Halloween.
Nice. Special treats. I have cheat days too every now and then, It's like, all right, feed those indulgences every so often.
Yeah, you can always cheat a couple days. I try not to. I mean, part of the reason I changed my diet was because I got more into YouTubing, and I was tired of having like big zits all over my face, which, my skin's not perfect now, but it is much better on the diet I'm following now than when I was breaking out all the time and, smoking and drinking. Drinking makes me break out the most, to be honest.
Yeah, I quit
alcohol.
drinking. I quit drinking alcohol about 2 years ago, and that was a pretty good decision, I think.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Cool. How much more time do you got? Do you want to keep going on some other topics, or are you kind of starting to wind down?
I could go a little bit longer, maybe another 30 minutes if you want.
Okay. I'm curious to hear your thoughts kind of going into, we touched on a little bit earlier with the energy map kind of talks a little bit about, well, actually, you mentioned them not wanting to build like nice buildings anymore, and that kind of made me think about the Tartary.
Oh, Tartary, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, when you were in your list of topics that I read before, you said, what's the most surprising thing that you came upon?
Yeah.
And I was going to mention that. This idea, actually I pulled up the YouTube channel. One that talks about it a lot is this YouTube channel, John Levy. Also that Crow House talks about it, but he's totally black-pilled. But this idea that there was civilizations in between ours and Atlantis, or Tartaria. Tartaria has become this word for an idea that covers several different things. I mean, it was definitely a country covering most of the Asian continent from the 1400s to like the 1600s or so, maybe a little bit earlier than that. I might have gotten those dates a little bit mixed up, but around that period was when they were at their height. Actual country covering almost the entire Asian continent that has been erased from history for the most part. But now there's different historians that say that that country was actually an imperialistic power, much like Britain was, and that they controlled much of the world or had colonies all over the world, including in America, including much of the whole western part of America. And that these interactions between like Napoleon, the Napoleonic Wars, the Louisiana Purchase, actually had something to do with that territorial claim being revoked and, you know, redistributed to America and to Britain. And so that's a very interesting concept that we don't really know. There's actually really only one Russian scholar who claims that this thing existed, that Trans-Siberian American Empire of Tartaria. I believe his name is, I'm not going to remember it, Alexander Popakov, let's just say off the top of my head. But there's different theories. So this country actually existed. It's a question of how much influence they had. But then there's a whole nother question of how old like these Capitol buildings in our country and over the world actually are. Because there's questions of how we could have built Capitol buildings in every state of this country in a time period when, you know, we had no electric cranes, we had only horse and buggy. And the photographs, the earliest I mean, they were built supposedly around the time of the earliest photographs. So there is some photographic evidence, but it's scant. And that these photographs, for the most part, suggest that, you know, these buildings were pretty much already there. Like, there's not really that many photos of their construction phase. And that they were sort of reappropriated. And I've even seen one thing, I really would like to research this more, but I don't really know where it came from. I saw this one article of an old newspaper talking about how antiquities were discovered across our entire country. Antiquities meaning pretty much the Capitol buildings and these, like the oldest buildings we see with the elaborate stonework, that, you know, no one can produce these things now, mainly because of economic reasons. But, you know, if no one can produce them now, how were we producing them 100 years ago? It's just like, huh? And so the question is, if they came from Tartaria is one possibility, Atlantis is another possibility. There are terms for an Atlantean empire that was actually on America. I think the Native Americans called it like Manitoba, which is actually a province in Canada now. But I've learned some of this at the Serpent Mountain festivals. Just like, this is why these festivals are canceled now because of COVID. No, it's really because they don't want people learning about our true history, or even questioning ideas, like having different ideas about our true history. You know, maybe that's not even the true history, but for even people to question it, it breaks this Illuminati control matrix of the mind control and submission. So, and it leads us to possibilities of different energy sources and different ways to structure society that are more pleasant to live in and more beneficial to the common man than this slave system they're trying to create. You know, the whole premise of what I was learning at Serpent Mound was that, you know, we would build these mounds, build these effigies on mounds, and somehow bring down lightning and harvest manna from the lightning hitting ponds like on these mounds, and that would invigorate all the crops around that area with the energy of the lightning, and they would have these like supercharged crops. And even what we call ormus now, that the lightning would hit these ponds and create ormus that would be like the manna from the Bible, and this like super nutrient dense substance that people could live off of and even live longer lives than we live today. Like, I do believe that humans are meant to live much longer than this like I don't even know how long people are supposed to live now, because it seems like the boomer generation is dying in the same time period as their parents. You know, all these people who are in their 90s, a lot of their children are dying in their 60s from cancer. And so I don't know what our lifespan's supposed to be. Like, at the rate we're going, like, our generation's lifespan is only going to be till 50 years old. And they're, like I said before, trying to create an epsilon class. And so this Tartaria thing's really interesting. We've done one video on it on our New Templars channel, and it's something we want to get into a lot more deeply. I still haven't really read a book on it, but I've seen several interesting documentaries on Tartaria and how much influence they really had. Like I mentioned, that Bon Jovi channel is a good one to check out. New Realities is another, or is it New Realities or New Earth? I think it's New Earth. Another good channel to check out for this, like the mysteries of the antiquities and, you know, how old really they are, where did they come from? It has always been really important questions for me. The Sphinx itself has been one of the most interesting objects in the entire world in terms of wondering where it came from, how old it really is. And I think that's definitely older than most of these Tartaria theories. But, you know, the Tartaria theories just back right up to the Atlantis theories and how many civilizations have even been on this planet. You know, I've questioned, you know, what if there were civilizations even before Atlantis? Like, I don't know, like, because our planet forms on the time scale of like billions of years, and these civilizations can last just 100,000. So, you know, there could be whole civilizations beyond ours, beyond Atlantis, like, you know, tens of other ones that we don't even talk about. And, you know, all of our society or all of our cities and relics today could be a mishmash of all of them.
Yeah, and some of the
there's really no reason to limit your thinking on that.
Yeah, some of the cool stuff I've been hearing too about the Tartaria stuff and the buildings is the buildings themselves being used in ways having to do with free energy, having to do kind of what you're talking about with the lightning, with using the aether, spreading healing energies rather than the more destructive energies that 5G kind of represent.
Definitely, yeah, I've heard that the pipe organs in all the medieval churches and the spires created an effect of literally like sending out a positive vibration over the whole town, which would draw people into the church. And then they would use psychedelics in the church to like make people have a religious experience. So yeah, there's something with that aether, the spires. Part of the energy map was this idea that all of our skyscrapers in the world, and especially what we call observation towers that they've built in several cities, there are these insanely high spires that seem to have really no purpose. Like they would not build these things just as observation towers. The idea that those are actually harvesting aether energy, that whatever antennas they have on top, yes, maybe some of them are for television or satellite communication, but that the main point of those giant antennas and all these observation towers is actually to bring in energy to the city.
Do you think
atmospheric energy?
Do you think that 5G is kind of a modern version of that, or do you think, or that could be used as a modern version of that?
Possibly, yeah. They could be both transmitters and receivers. You know, I think it is somewhat of a different type of energy, being as 5G is so low to the ground. It's not exactly like tapping into like atmospheric energy. I mean, even some of them are just on like street lamps and stuff, so that's not exactly like getting up into the ionosphere. You know, if you understand the layers of the atmosphere, we have this layer of the atmosphere called the ionosphere, and it's called the ionosphere because there's more ions up there, and the ozone layer is in the ionosphere because ozone is what happens when you put electricity into oxygen, or oxygen hits electricity, it turns into ozone. So obviously there's electricity up there, you know, like it's turning into ozone up there for a reason. And so that's, I think, why we build these spires, and definitely 5G could be doing something like that. I'm not 100% on that one, but it's possible. I mean, it depends who made the tower. Like, there could be all different types of things going on. Whoever made the tower, you know, maybe the Hawaii ones are just fucking like laser guns to kill Americans. But there's no 5G company that I really trust would actually want to make like an energy producing tower. Yeah. But I think it's definitely a possibility that we could build a system of towers like that, similar to 5G, that would be creating energy all over the place. But then they also have things like, say, a 0-point device that can just sit on a desktop, and it's the size of a shoebox. So then what's the point of all that other stuff? So all different types of energy out there, and theories and possibilities and advanced technologies that could really simplify things. And I really don't believe that we should be investing a whole lot in building like 1 million wind turbines either, like the way Biden proposes. Like, yeah, like maybe like in a really old-fashioned environmentalist handbook, like that's the ideal solution. But I think they're, like Trump says, they do kill birds. They're kind of ugly in a way. And it's just a lot of material, a lot of maintenance, and I don't think it's the best way to generate renewable energy. I definitely think that, like, to me, maybe there's some potential for wind turbines, but it's not as like the main thing. And hydroelectric energy definitely, as well, as a great way to generate energy. I mean, I think that the Hoover Dam itself is actually an extraterrestrial project. It was, I mean, when you looked at that Hoover Dam, I went to the Hoover Dam the first time in 2018, the first time I went to Las Vegas. And it's an eerie vibe, like how massive it is, and thinking that this was built in the 1930s.
Yeah.
That you don't see any mega projects like that have been built in the 21st century. It's like, why can't we get it together anymore?
Yeah.
And the fact they built that in the 30s, how massive it is, it makes me think there was some kind of extraterrestrial guidance or intervention in that process. And in the little plaques in the area where there's sort of like a dedication area on the sort of western side of the Hoover Dam, they have this star map, and like there's a picture of Alcyone, which is the center of the Pleiades. And I think the Pleiadians might have helped out whoever built that. Like J. Edgar Hoover got a little assist from somebody.
Could be.
But that's a great like alternative power source, and I think that we could have hydroelectric power in probably a lot more places, and I don't know why we don't really go for it. I mean, it certainly might disrupt like the fish life and the river life, but then you have a whole lake on the other side of it that's flourishing biodiversity, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of different potentials for energy, and it's interesting to me. Like, we have Elon Musk exploring all these things, but he's bringing, I think, a lot more long-term destruction. And you're talking too about like the wind turbines. Like, that's a lot of metal and things that it takes to create, but it's also a lot of waste. Like those propellers or whatever, they have to get recycled every few years. So now there's just giant fields of these being buried, and people don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, there's problems with wind.
Yeah, and it's just fascinating. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts too, just getting a little bit more into kind of the new technologies. Have you gotten much into like the healing beds and the secret space program kind of stuff, or?
Oh yeah. I learned probably the most about healing webs. James Rink from Super Soldier Chat did a really extensive video, basically documenting every different type of healing bed that every secret space whistleblower has talked about, and every different platform. Like James Rink is amazing at just compiling lists of stuff, and that's what he did for this medbed thing. And yeah, there's a lot of people who have come forward and said that they have knowledge of these things, all different varieties, all different levels of sophistication of healing beds. There are more or less automated ways of healing the body or doing surgery using holographic technology like lasers and 3D printing, all combined into one apparatus that can literally lie down and it can just scan you, just like almost like an MRI, plus then fix everything that they need to fix, down to an even quantum level. So there's potentials for sound healing in that same type of a system. Sound healing, just pitch, a vibration, a frequency that's tuned to a certain disease that can just explode it in 1 second. I think that's what like Royal Rife was up to. Bioresonance machines. I've recently gotten, I realized you can buy, what do you call them? Violet ray machines on Amazon. If you give me 1 second, I'll show you.
Yeah.
So violet ray technology was pioneered by, I think, Royal Rife, and these were popular like in the 1920s and 30s and 1910s, I think. And let's see, what can I unplug here to give it an adequate demonstration? So it's kind of like up for debate whether this can actually like cure too many diseases. Like it's sold on Amazon now as a facial product, like just to like stimulate your skin, yeah, regenerate cells. But they used these in the 1920s, and they were prescribed for literally like almost everything, like for cancer, for anything on your skin. They had apparatuses you could actually put it up your butt, and it's supposed to heal your whole body. But let's get this thing going. There it is.
Nice.
So yeah, I don't know how effective it is, but okay, we've been talking too long because I can't even I can't speak anymore. But you know, it's just a potential, and I think it's worth exploring. There's definitely evidence that electric medicine has been heavily repressed by big pharma because, you know, something like this is renewable. You don't have to go to the doctor and keep paying for more pills. That something like this is something you can do at home. It's something that's easy and simple. And I think that's, you know, there's potential future of entire medicine that's like that. If you have a healthy diet and you have a few tools, like some electric medicine tools, some sound healing tools, like I have healing bowls too. Obviously crystals, I'm a big fan of crystal healing, even though I'm not sure exactly how effective it is, but it definitely aids in psychic augmentation. You see how
Oh yeah,
you see how my lights flicker when I say crystals aid in psychic augmentation? Yeah. Organite, there's all kinds of things.
Yeah, well,
so you asked about healing beds. Like, I don't think we're there yet, but I've turned my bed into a grounding bed. Like, I have a grounding blanket, which I've been using for at least 6 months now. And I absolutely love it. I got my grounding blanket from Amazon, but the website earthing.com has grounding mats, and they have like a polyester grounding blanket. I got an organic one because I'm allergic to polyester, but it's like I just feel like all these different things I'm buying are like kind of like I'm like building my own sort of makeshift healing bed, kind of like how Iron Man built his first Iron Man suit when he was in captivity.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're going to get there eventually, I think. And when we get the really advanced ones, then that's when we really start living our full lifespan of 300 years or whatever, 1,500 years, however long it might be. And I think it's, I'm not going to say it's coming. I do think it's coming. It's not coming from the system that's in place right now, though. Like, don't expect to find a healing bed in a hospital. You're more likely to build it in your own apartment by ordering some shit off Amazon than finding your healing at the hospital.
Yeah.
What do you know about healing beds?
Well, I'm familiar with that video. I've also been looking into, sound healing beds, using plasma GANs, Keshi technology stuff. I know there's a lot of iffy stuff around him, but yeah, crystals, copper, using copper trefoils and different layouts of copper. Yep, exactly. So just kind of like you're saying, you can kind of start to piece things together. And start to create systems that are really beneficial. And like you're saying, it's the diet, it's the things that you surround yourself with. And it's taking, not only that, but it's what you're digesting information-wise too. Which
Definitely.
is important.
The frequency of the information you take in.
I do know that there is a healing bed that was released this past month, and that there's actually photos of Trump with the bed. So there have been some rumors around Trump potentially releasing this technology, and there's some specials, like some local TV specials in the city where it was released. I forget the name of it. I was just trying to find it. I can send you a link about it later. But it looks really interesting. They used it to heal cancer in a guy, and it basically, he just went into this bed. It's like a big machine that you just lay in, and it'll blast you, and they're admitting that it heals cancer now. So that's what they're starting with.
Yeah, send me that. That'd be great.
It's pretty phenomenal stuff. So it could be sooner than we realize, but again, like you're saying, like, who knows if Trump stays in office. There's a lot of rumors that things will be released in his first term. But if he's taken out of office, then who knows if it'll be released or...
Yeah, there's a lot resting on this election.
And even if he is in office, who knows if it'll be released? Like a lot of this could just be hearsay. And I do still have this thought of like, there is a chance that there is some super genius level coordination going on where it's like we all have this hope in Trump potentially releasing these stuff, but he's going to release kind of what you're saying. It's like the technology can be used for good or bad. And we could have this hope that through this, that it's going to be released out and it's going to be sold as this good dream. And then as everyone has it now, then it flips. So I do have these worries of like Trump being a double agent, and even more so than he is, you know, there's layers to it, I think, in play.
Yeah, I have some concerns about that too, but you can only hope for the best, you know. Yeah, exactly. I didn't even vote for him to begin with, so just going with the program, and I haven't been assassinated yet for doing Deep State Mapping Project, putting out my truth. Yeah. So in terms of that, I think he's delivered. He's delivered like the non-war in Iran. He's delivered economy stuff. Yeah. All the weapon sales are a little bit questionable. The 5G rollout is highly questionable. Yeah. But the COVID thing, his involvement with that is questionable. I mean, I know he went to Davos, to the World Economic Forum, just before COVID was launched. And who knows what kind of private conversations happened there in terms of planning this thing. And in terms of not firing Fauci from day one, that was questionable. Yeah. So we got to keep an open mind on Trump. I mean, even if Biden wins, you know, maybe Trump was a stooge of the cabal, and that, who knows? It's like it's up to us. Like the zombies are gonna go walk into the slaughterhouse, and the woke people, we're responsible for building the new Earth and, you know, discovering these technologies. Yep. And you know, if we can buy a violet ray on Amazon. Yep. Then who knows? Maybe eventually we'll be able to buy a med bed on Amazon, and they won't even advertise it. Yeah, or we'll be like able to just find the open source information to build it ourselves, and I don't know. I do see a good future. I have hope. I have a lot of hope, and I see good things in the future. But like you're saying, it's up to us to take responsibility and stop projecting our hopes onto these so-called leaders and actually take action in our lives today. And I think it's really important. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, before my Patreon got deleted, like my next move in life was I was going to relocate. Like I'm currently living with family. It's what's enabled me to start Deep State Mapping Project, which was, you know, an uncertain venture. I had to have that family support in order to be supported to do something like this, because you know, I couldn't do this if I was working for any kind of a cabal company. I'll be fired like that. Yeah. And so that's been really beneficial, but I'm at the point where it is making a decent enough income that I wanted to get my own distribution center, my own place, and hopefully some property, and start sort of like almost like a community. Like I'm open to sharing my property with other people. Like I don't necessarily want a bunch of roommates, 7 strangers living in a house, see what happens. Yeah. But I definitely want to be around people that are like-minded, and, you know, establish some type of a community in some area. Like I'm very drawn to the desert right now. Anywhere Southwest desert, from Yucca Valley to Phoenix, Arizona, or Sedona, anywhere in between there. So that's what I wanted to do. I got to get my Patreon set up again, because I need a little bit of a reliable income in case. It's really hard running a website that's going against the cabal, because, you know, at any stage, anything could be shut down. I mean, my payment gateways could be shut down. It's just like any type of success I'm having, they could just squash me. And so that's very frustrating. But you got to just keep persevering, you know, take the punches and then try to recover and come back stronger, more protected. I mean, I really do feel that the hosting service I'm on now is very independent and free speech oriented, so I don't think that I'll have a problem with them, you know, unless the whole city of Phoenix goes somehow, because I think that's where the servers are. But, you know, just got to roll with it and do our best. Exactly. All right, well, we're getting there to a closing up point, I think. I'd like to just thank you for joining us today and sharing your thoughts and ideas, and yeah, it's great to have you on. Great to speak to a like-minded Dylan. And I wish you the best of luck with this podcast. It's pretty cool. Everything's looking good so far on it. Sweet. Yeah. All right. Well,
Thank you, and have a...
So I'll say subscribe to New Templars if we're still on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I guess probably check some other platforms. I know that our whole New Templars library of videos has already migrated over to lbry.tv. We're thinking about even finding another permanent video hosting platform. But check out the New Templars, subscribe whatever platform we're on. And Deep State Mapping Project is on pretty much every platform. Try searching. Definitely type in the web address www.deepstatemappingproject.com into your web browser. You'll find all of our information, all of our free downloads. Probably by the time that this is released, we'll have set up the Patreon or whatever the donation system is again to offer the more advanced downloads. And then obviously we have posters, t-shirts, prints, Intel packets. Intel packet is basically all of these letter-sized prints in one envelope. It's the main thing I sell, the most popular product. And so it's a really nice way to get everything we've done, all of our information in one manila envelope. And so that's our most popular thing. And you get little flyers that you can wake up your friends with, all of our flyers and stuff too. So that's a really cool product that's really unique. So check out deepstatemappingproject.com information. Share the information with anyone who might be receptive. We're trying to save lives and build the new Earth. It's a noble cause.
It is, for sure. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right.
See you later.
See ya.